What is up, guys? So I was asked about some flagships that I could recommend, and here are five that I have personally reviewed for the channel. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first one is the Galaxy S20 Plus. It's going for around $738 for the international model, and for the USA model, it's going for around $1,000 for that 5G model. So it's still a very expensive phone. I paid like $1,200 for it when it first came out, so extremely expensive, but it is a really solid and awesome flagship. So one of the things I loved was the design on this phone. It was really beautiful. The glass back aluminum frame on here was just really nice. I really loved the color on here as well. I think it was the cloud blue, and of course it's IP68 dust and water resistant. My favorite thing about this phone was the display. So it was just a beautiful color accurate display. Samsung calls it the dynamic AMOLED display. It was a 6.7-inch display, 1440p, 525 for the PPI. It was capable of doing 120 hertz on the display, and the experience was just super buttery smooth. It just felt like an extremely fast and smooth phone. So I was really impressed by that. And you have the little small punch hole at the top, very thin bezels on here. The screen is not as curved as on the last year's model, but overall I just really like the design and display on this phone. So you do have Android 10, of course, with the latest One UI 2.1. Mine was the Snapdragon 865, so if you get that USA model, and you also have the Adreno 650 on here, so gaming and stuff is just going to be absolutely phenomenal. Multitasking is just excellent on here. You have the 8 gig model with 128 gigs of internal storage. This is going to be a multitasking beast, hopping out of applications. You can choose which application you want to never close, which is something that I really love. You also have some really great speakers on here. They're stereo speakers, and they just sound fantastic. They're just extremely loud, very crisp and clear. So there is no headphone jack, of course, on here, and you also have NFC as well, which is really awesome. So the camera situation is one of my favorite parts of this phone. You have some beautiful photos on here that this thing is capable of taking. A 12 megapixel wide, 64 megapixel telephoto, and you also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide, as well as a 0.3 TFO sensor. You also have 8K video capability on here at 24 frames, and you also have a 10 megapixel selfie camera as well. So the fingerprint scanner is under the display, and it's very fast, so I was really happy with that. So you have a 4,500 milliamp battery, which for me lasted all day, no problems. And you have wireless charging as well as 25-watt fast charging. So this phone is overall a beast, one of my favorite phones that I have reviewed this year. Next is going to be the LG V50. This is overall just an excellent smartphone, very under the radar kind of, and I believe this is still one of the cheapest 5G phones that you can buy right now. So this has a very premium design. It's glass and metal design, feels very nice in the hands. IP68 dust and water resistant as well, and overall I just really like this design. One of my favorite things is the flat camera design. I just think that looks really nice and elegant. You have the physical fingerprint scanner on the back, and you have a POLED display. It's a 6.4-inch 1440p display, 538 for the PPI. One of my favorite things about this display, absolutely beautiful. You do have the little notch on here, but it does make good use having dual cameras up front. But overall, just a beautiful, bright and vibrant display, a very high resolution. One of my favorite things. This phone does come with Android 10 out of the box with the Snapdragon 855 and the Adreno 640, which basically means all of these phones on this list can play pretty much all games on high settings, no problem. Whatever it is, Fortnite, PUBG, whatever, you will be able to play. So you do have micro SD support, as well as 128 gigs of storage and 6 gigs of RAM. This phone is very fast, just multitasking, coming in and out of applications, even heavier applications. I've never had a problem with performance on this phone. You have have stereo speakers, which aren't the loudest stereo speakers, but they're pretty loud. The single firing speaker at the bottom is loud. It's just a little front grill one. It's decently loud, so it is better than nothing. But you do have NFC on here, as well as some really great cameras on here. So you have a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide, using 4K 30 or 60 FPS. And like I said, you have those dual cameras as well up front, a 8 megapixel standard, and then you have a wide camera at 5 megapixels. And it takes some really great photos, very color accurate as well. That's one of the things that LG phones are kind of underrated, with color accuracy. These are some of the most color accurate photos that you can take, which is something that I really like. And overall dynamic range, the video on here is great as well. So just super solid cameras on the LG V50. Battery life is also something that is really great. You have a 4,000 milliamp battery with 18-watt fast charging, wireless charging as well. You can literally get around 8 to 9 hours of screen on time, which is really great. On this phone, I have done a battery drain test, so you can go ahead and check that out. So it has everything that you could really want. NFC, it's water resistant, great battery life, and it is a cheap price, and you get that 5G if you live in a 5G area. Next is the Pixel 4. So I really enjoyed using this phone for the camera, but overall this is still a great flagship as well. So you can find this for around $700 right now, and you have a glass and metal design on here. It feels super solid in the hand, and definitely has a unique kind of design to it. You can always tell a Pixel phone, to me it just looks kind of strange looking, but you do have an IP68 dust and water resistant design on here, so you can get this phone wet. You have a OLED display. This has one of the smaller displays at 5.7 inches. It is a 1080p display for 44 for the PPI. It is 90 hertz as well, so very buttery smooth, especially with the stock Android. So overall, just the experience of just being on stock Android and having everything nice and neat is something that I really enjoy. You also have the Snapdragon 855 Adreno 640. Again, if you're a gamer, no issues with this phone. I did a gaming test. If you want to check that out, you can pretty much play everything on high. This phone does not have micro SD support, so you will not be able to expand the storage. And one of the weird things is that it's only 64 gigs of internal storage, so you might have to use Google Drive if you have just a lot of stuff on your phone as far as photos and videos. You also have 6 gigs of RAM, so this phone was plenty enough fast. Again, I didn't notice anything with performance here. Now you do have NFC on this phone as well, so that is really nice, and you have some super secure Face ID. It is really good. Almost as good, or if not better, than Apple's Face ID, but it is debatable, that I've seen on YouTube. But overall, just a really good security. You do not have a fingerprint scanner on here, so you're kind of missing that just second option, which is fine to me. It's not a big deal, but you're really buying this phone for the camera. So you have a 12.2 megapixel wide and a 16 megapixel telephoto. So they opted out not to put the ultra wide in here, which is weird, but it is what it is. You have 4K video and 8 megapixel selfie camera that shoots in 1080p. The photos on here are beautiful. I showed my family, and this is the only phone that got a reaction out of people like, oh, what camera is that? What picture? How did you get such nice portrait photos and stuff like that? So I was really impressed with this camera, and it impressed a lot of people, more so than the iPhone and the LG that I had. Even the Galaxy S20 just didn't get that response from people. So this is still one of the best phones that you can get to take some really great and solid photos on. Now I did a battery drain test. You have a 2,800 milliamp battery, 18-watt fast charging, wireless charging. The battery on here is respectable. I believe I got around 7 hours of screen on time, which is definitely really good for a battery at this size. So overall, if you want to take some excellent photos, definitely check out sell the Pixel 4. Alright, so next is the iPhone 11. You can find this guy for around $650 to $700. We'll put the links down below again. This is overall a super solid phone if you just want an iPhone. So you have a glass and metal design on here, and I really like the design. It's one of my favorite things about the phone. It just feels super solid in the hand. It's IP68, dust and water resistant. One of the things I did not like about this phone was the IPS display on this phone. At this price point, all the phones on this list have like a P OLED display or something like that, and this one does not. It has an IPS display. It's a 6.1 inch 828 by 1792. So it's a 720p plus display, and all the phones on here are either 1440p or 1080p. So that was a little bit of a letdown, but the display is fine. I think for most people, they won't really notice the difference. This phone, of course, has the latest version of iOS, and is going to get iOS updates at least for the next probably 5 to 7 years. So that is really awesome. So when you buy this phone, you can rest assured that you don't have to, quickly upgrade to get software support. So you do not have micro SD support, which is a bummer because this phone only comes with 64 gigs of storage on the base model and 4 gigs of RAM. So you're going to be forced to use the cloud. If you download a lot of content on your phone, then you're definitely going to be using the cloud on here. So you have some very loud stereo speakers on here as well. So I'm always really impressed by that. A lot of bass, and just sounds very, very high quality. Of course, you have the Face ID, which is the reason why you have a huge notch up front, which I'm not a big fan of, but again, most people don't really care. And you have the Apple Pay on here as well. So this phone has pretty much everything you could really want. Now, the cameras on here are a big reason to get this phone. They're just some really good cameras. You have a 12 megapixel wide, a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It's using 4K, 24, 30, or 60 FPS, which is really solid. I think the iPhone still has some of the best video. You also have a 12 megapixel selfie camera that can shoot in 4K as well. And as you can see from these photos, very, very solid camera on here. So one of my favorite things about this phone, battery life is pretty decent on here. You have a 3110 milliamp battery with wireless charging as well as 18-watt fast charging, and you can get some pretty good battery life. You can definitely get through a day around 6 to 6 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time. It's definitely solid for a day. So overall, iPhone 11 is very, very solid. Last on the list, and my favorite, is the OnePlus 7 Pro. It is still my daily driver. I'm planning on upgrading to the 7T Pro, and it's mostly because of the display, which we will get into, but the overall design of this phone is very solid. It's a glass and aluminum frame. It feels super solid in the hand, very thin as well, but it does have a nice weight to it. So if you're really into media, this is going to be the best phone because you have a fluid AMOLED display. It's a 1440p 6.67 inch display, 90 hertz, so super smooth display, 516 for the PPI. But as you can see, you have no notch on here. You have the pop-up camera, which just gives it a very immersive experience, especially with the curve on the display as well. So it's just a super immersive experience, whether you're just watching videos or on Instagram, Twitter. This is going to be the phone you really want to use. So you have the latest version of Android 10 with Oxygen OS 10.0, and basically Oxygen OS gets a ton of updates, and they're always a bunch of security patches, and they're always fixing bugs. Is something that I really like about OnePlus. So you have the Snapdragon 855 Adreno 640, again, top-notch performance, especially when it comes to gaming and stuff. A very immersive experience. You do not have micro SD support on this phone for some reason. Now you have 128 gigs of storage, which I haven't been able to fill up, so to me it's not a big deal. You do have 6 gigs of RAM as well, so multitasking and stuff on here and just doing intensive stuff is going to be definitely fine on this phone. So one of my favorite things about this phone are the cameras. So you have a 48 megapixel wide, and 8 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. So the cameras are kind of underrated, as you can see from these photos. They take some really good photos. Now it's not going to be as good as the Galaxy S20, or I even put this below the LG V50, but it takes super solid photos, as you can see. So definitely underrated. As you can see, you have that pop-up camera, which is really cool. So it's a 16 megapixel selfie camera that works great. Overall, this is just a super solid phone. Great stereo speakers as well. This phone also has NFC. The fingerprint scanner on the display is still one of the fastest that I have used. Now this phone does have a 4000 milliamp battery with 30-watt fast charging, so this thing charges extremely fast. One of my favorite things about the phone. Now you do not have wireless charging on here, which could be a deal breaker for you, but it's not a big deal for me. I've been using the phone for a while now and haven't really missed it. Battery life on here, you're getting around 8 hours of screen on time, 8 hours and 30 minutes if you're even doing just heavy stuff. So that is really nice. So overall, one of my favorites. Again, this is a very media focused phone, so if you're into that, definitely get this phone. So thanks for watching. I will catch you guys in the next one.